welcome to this second part of this tutorial, and we start off by loading in an asset from Quixel. So I downloaded this one, and now I want to export it. It's pretty important that you download the high poly source here, because we later on gonna simulate some stuff on it. And if you use LOD 0 and create displacement afterwards, the collision will not properly work. So just toggle that on, download it, and then under export settings, Houdini, of course. So we need to start the Megascans plugin. Then we can hit export. So we should have that here by default. There are way too many. I think we can delete that scatter setup. Let's copy and paste this one in the material context, so we at least have this, and we can call that, I don't know, let's call it rock. Then inside here we want the high poly source, so we can copy this into a new geo context. Let's call that rock. Paste that inside here. Oopsies. And we can get rid of that. And also this. Let's see where this is. Cool. And now I'm gonna move this a bit. So I think, where's our cup? This is our cup. I think by default this is way too big. I mean, probably it is a big, giant cliff, but especially with rocks, you can scale them in any scale. They always look good. So let's do that. Let's get a transform down here. And then I scale it back to something like that. And maybe I translate it to there, minus 0.02 there. That should work for now. And probably we want to arrange that cup also in a more interesting way. So let's get a transform node. And to save a bit time, I mean, you can find your own interesting composition by pushing it around here and there. But I try to save some time, and I'm gonna copy and paste the values that I like. So I have these two transform. Oh, whoopsies! I have these two transforms from my previous setup, and I think they kind of work good. So it sits here, and we will basically, I think, yeah, from this side, copy and paste that over and have another rock here on the left side. So the cup is in between those two rocks. So let's do that. Copy and paste the rock. Let's call it maybe rock 2. And again, I think there's no right and wrong, but if you want to have the exact values, you can pause the video and copy and paste the values here. But yeah, I think you can arrange it in a different way, and it probably will look good anyways. So for the second rock, I go with something like that. And again, you can pause the video and type in the same exact numbers if you want to. So we have basically something like that going on. And I now wanna adjust the camera. So let's hop into the camera. And by default, it is looking into the rock, and we do want to have something like that. That is good. So these are the exact same numbers I used. And now we're gonna change some stuff. I think not here, but under sampling. I first of all want to go with a lower f-stop. The lower the f-stop, the higher the depth of field will be. So if you want to tweak that, just keep in mind if you go lower, you will have more blurred areas in the foreground and background. So jump out of the camera and I will adjust the focus distance to, yeah, I think something like that. So we have to focus on the foreground here of the cup. Then I want to go into the Redshift camera. Underneath here, I still want to go with filmic, and I keep this enabled. Yeah. Cool, so we have our basic composition. And let's see how the lighting looks like. And probably we also need to adjust some shaders, but for now I want to create some basic lighting for that scene. So come on, Redshift. So by default, this looks quite horrible because we also need to relink the materials. Let's do that real quick. We copied this rock material over here. So let's relink that. Might take a few seconds to load in the texture and to update the render preview, but that looks quite good. And we also need to do that here. And I mean, again, there's no right and wrong, and it really depends what kind of look you want to achieve. But I do want to have a more like a black rock or a darker rock that goes more into that direction. So this is way too bright for me. And I think also the lighting is a bit flat. So maybe let's do some basic stuff on shader. We later on gonna finesse the shader anyways, but just some basic adjustments. On the roughness, I want to go with raw. Let's get a screenshot of that. So I want to have raw. On the displacement also raw, and on the normal also raw. Then I want to have the bump map connected into here. And the rest will be done later if we have our lighting. Let's hit refresh and see if that changed a lot. I think usually it will change quite a lot depending on the scene. Yeah, I mean, I mean, you see a difference, and I think it looks already a bit nicer. So let's get a more interesting lighting, and for the dome light, I want to rotate it until I like the look of it. That is interesting. Actually, I think I go with a more contrasty look for this one. So whenever I do a more contrasty render, I use area lights and I try to find an angle of the dome light which is straight frontal, so we don't have any shadows going on or any direction of the lighting. And then I get the lighting quite low, so let's say something like that. It's pretty dark. And then I start to work on some area lights, but before I get the area lights, we need a null. That will be our target for the lights. I always like to do that when I work with area lights, because I think it's easier to handle them if they direct or if they look into the direction of the target, and we just need to push them around in space and find a sweet angle. So of course our targets will be the cup, and I think I go with the exact same values I used with my example file. So that is pretty close. And here -49919. Cool. So let's create the first light, Eris light, and this is by default. By the way, I don't like to have them enabled in the viewport. It always distracts me and annoys me. So let's call the first key light sharp. And whenever I work with area lights, I want to have a key light that has a very sharp shadow and another key light that creates a bit softer shadows, but I show you what I mean by that in a second. So first of all, load in the under the look at option, we're gonna pipe in this target. Oh, oopsies. So we're gonna load that in, and immediately you see the light. Whenever I move it in space, it always looks at this cup, which is kind of useful in my opinion. Okay, so at first the intensity is way too strong. 100 is always too strong, and if you have a scene where 100 fits, it means something is off in your scene or the light is too far away or something like that. Usually you should go with an intensity between 1 or 0.1, and maybe the strongest should be 10. If you're above that, something is off in your scene. Then we're gonna go with a lower shape. That is also quite was quite too big, and I want to have a disk. So as I told you, I want to have quite a sharp one. We dial back the spread, so that means the shadows will be more sharp and pronounced. So in this example, I also want to go with the exact same values. So just to have it in the right space, but of course you can play around with this lighting. That position should work quite well. And as you can see, I want to have the sharp lighting coming from the right side. I think that's naturally just making sense, because if you're kind of in a cage, the light comes from this side, in my opinion. It would be weird. I mean, obviously it's blocked here. It would be weird if the light comes from the bottom. So I immediately decided to go with that side, and oopsies. And for this key light, I want to have it, for this key sharp, I want to have it a bit more pushed in the direction of the camera, so we see it frontal. And for the more blurred or less defined sharp one with a higher spread, I want to go a bit from behind. But let's actually see what we got right now. So it was quite dark with only the dome light, and we should get a bit of a highlight going on here, but it's probably still too dark. Yeah, I mean, it starts to look interesting. We get this very nice big highlights going on here and here, but we kind of lose all the details here, and we have almost no definition here. And I think in general the image is too dark. So what can we actually do to brighten that a bit up? Let's copy and paste this one and call this key light soft. So on this one, I actually do want to keep the same exact shape, but I do want to push that into the background here, as I told you. And again, to just create the exact same image, I'm gonna copy and paste those values over, but they're not too far from where I'm right now. And usually this takes quite a long time. You're in the viewport running and pushing the lights and finding a sweet angle you like. But yeah, I just know this works quite well. And inside here, with the spread on this one, I want to go very high with something like 1, and I keep the same intensity. And there's one other thing we can do to maybe get a bit more definition in some areas. Well, let's actually see what we got right now. And then I show you another trick I quite often like to do to get more definition in some areas, especially in these down there. So you see we get another beautiful highlight here from this side, and I think it looks very natural, and a bit more in this area and here. So what else can we do to get a bit more light into these areas here and the very dark areas? And I really like to do that quite often in my renders. First of all, I dial back the volume because we don't need that right now, and I want to crank up the global illumination to 3. So you immediately see we get more in that area. I mean, it's not perfect, but the bounce light is a bit stronger, and we can start to see that there's actually also a rock and not just a dark, I don't know what. Cool. And we can also dial back the volume on the dome light. And then I'd like to introduce one last light, and that is more kind of a fill light, I think. Oopsies. So yeah, that one will be a fill light. So let's create another RS light. Oh, and I need to toggle that off for now. And I want the fill light actually, let's disable this. And it should, let's actually do it like that. We copy and paste that over. I think that's faster. So the intensity will be quite low because it's a fill, but the spread will be also quite low, and maybe a bit bigger in terms of size. And since this is a fill light, I do want to fill into the dark areas, so especially in that area. So I push that a bit down here. So the light is directing onto that wall. And again, I copy and paste over the exact values. So these are the exact values that worked for me. And the rotation is not that important, but just to be right, I also copy and paste that over. And onto the fill light, I think I don't have the global illumination to 3, but on 1, and the intensity on. Okay, cool. Let's check what the render looks like. We should get a bit more light into here and into this area, I guess, if the render preview is responding. Yes, exactly what I said. So as you can see, a bit more light here and there. I mean, we still want to have it quite contrasty, but I think it looks better than just the black area. So these are our 3 or 4 main lights. I mean, the dome light is not really doing much. Maybe for some reflections, but these are our 3 main lights. And now, last but not least, I want to create some kind of volume trails going on here. So let's get that also in. And for that, I want to create an RS light. Or let's copy and paste that over and create some changes on this. Let's call that volume. And whenever I do volume trails or stuff like that, I want to change that to spot. I think that works the best. And the intensity is okayish. I don't want actually the lighting to affect the scene. I just want some beautiful volume trails. Also quite subtle in the background. So I go with a quite high volume value and I change the angle to something like that. I will probably want to be around here. So as you can see, I just want some trails going on there. But again, I copy and paste over the exact same values, but you will see they won't change a lot. So it's a bit more upwards. Oh, quite a lot up and back. Yeah. But the angle would be the same, but probably you needed to change some things in intensity and stuff like that. So I know these numbers work and I don't want to tweak that and annoy you by endlessly tweaking my lighting. So cool. And there's one more important thing, that it looks more natural in my opinion. You want to toggle on use texture instead of color, and under the texture I have a Grayscale Gorilla texture you can download on Grayscale Gorilla called Gobo's Caustics, but I'm sure you find these motion masks or yeah, those light textures. I think they're called motion masks, or yeah, you can find them on Grayscale Gorilla. I can show you what they look like. Give me a second. So they should look like that. Light textures. So I have a few here. This is the Grayscale Gorilla one I'm using. Oh, Gobos are they called? Sorry. Yeah. So these are Gobo Caustics, for example. But I'm sure you can find plenty of them online by just Googling Gobos or motion masks, I think. Yeah. So just load that in, and I think now we need to change some values. I think by default, just be sure on the other lights the volume is on 0, and here it should be enabled. And also this is, I know the values work by tweaking them. So let's see what it looks like. By default, probably we're not gonna see anything because we need to enable the volume trails inside of the render settings, as far as I know. So let's see. Yeah, exactly. You don't see anything. So that's a good time to tweak a bit the render settings. Let's go on the Redshift, toggle on Advanced, and by default I'd like to change trace depth to something like 6 and brute force raise 4096. Then I go to volume scattering and I simply enable it, and immediately you can see these two trails. I mean, it's not changing that much in the scene, but yeah, we get those two beautiful trails. And I always like to change these. I mean, we don't have any subsurface scattering, but when I have something in my scene, I want it to affect the GI as well. Cool, so the next part will be, let's get in a background texture. So let's get in another geocontainer, call it background. And I want to go with something quite easy or plain a gradient one. So let's get a grid and UV unwrap it, and we basically want to push that new grid back here, rotate it by 90 degrees, so it's somewhere in the background. and the size can be way smaller. So 10 by 10 is way too big. And maybe we can push it a bit around, more in the background, a bit more up, and maybe a bit there. Yeah, that should be fine. So let's see, go back into the camera. Let's render that, and we're gonna create another material for the background. Oh, come on. I hope it's not crashing right now. Cool, also a good time to maybe save it incremental. Okay, let's create another RS material builder. Call that background and relink that inside here. Go into material, background, and we're gonna tweak a few stuff here. So I want to get a ramp, and then I want it to affect the base color. Let's see. And also the emission color. Where's the emission color? Down there. And I want to have quite a high roughness. And the emission should be on, I think, quite low. Yeah, 0.1. Let's see. Let's reload that because ramps, I don't know why, but ramps always needs a reload and then they work. That's quite annoying. There you go, you see? If we push it like that, yeah, and I want to have it the other way around, so I want this to be white and this to be black, so we see better the trails, and this area where the light actually falls on is brighter. So let's invert that, and I think by default that looks quite good. Yeah, maybe change that to this value. This is the exact same value. Okay, cool. So now I want to tweak the rock material because in my opinion this looks still quite CG, not so defined, and I think everything looks nice. The cup has quite a lot of details, but the rock itself is quite plain. So we're gonna use a lot noises to stack over it, but you will see what I mean by that. So let's at first work on the albedo. I want to use a few techniques I do quite often, and I'm sure you will understand what I mean. So let's get a ramp here, and to see what's happening, pipe that ramp into the output, and let's push that quite high, but invert it. So you see, we only mask a few areas out, and now we can use a RS change range, and in that change range we can remap these values from 0 to 1 to another range, and this is exactly what we want to do. So we want it to basically be, the black value should be 0.5, and the white value should be 5. And then we pipe that into the saturation. And I'm sure immediately we see a difference. Yeah, you can see it in these areas. We get a few more color touches. I think it looks a bit more interesting. And we want to do now the same thing with the roughness. So let's maybe keep that here and create another ramp for the roughness. Pipe that in. And to have a better understanding what's going on, pipe that inside of the output. Let's see. I think somewhere around here we start to get a nice contrasty values. This looks quite good. So let's get a copy and paste that over. Pipe that in. But this time we need different values. So the blacks should be 0.75 and the whites should be 2. And then we pipe that inside of the gamma. So let's see. And yeah, I think in this area you see it quite well. Or even here we see a bit more contrast and a bit more definition in it, although it's just playing with the color of the acid. I think it's starting to look quite good. Okay, now we work on the bump map. That is also quite important. So let's get a screenshot of that. So just we have a reference and get a bump blender. So we need to create maximum noises, and we need to have these 2 times. So copy and paste that over, and we need a color composite. Pipe these 2 in the color composite, and then we need a bump map. So, but first I show you what we do with the color composite, and by default it just shows the base color, and that is perfect. So let's first work on the base color, and since the object is not moving, we can stay with the source input on object instead of UV vertex attribute. When you have moving objects, you always want to change that to UV, just to keep that in mind. And by default, I want to go here with another noise type. Let's use wavy turbulence. And inside overall scale, let's go with something like that. So it's quite small or tiny. And now we can also tweak a bit more contrast inside of it so it looks more interesting. Now we get another noise, maximum noise, to mask the first noise and to drive a bit more variation in the overall bump scale of it. So this one can be a regular noise, but we want to have it smaller. Something like that could work. And I do want to change as well the contrast and the low clip to 0.3. And then I want to have the blacks on a value of 0.05. So that when I pipe inside here the color composite and I change it to multiply, they're not completely black, but they're way smaller or way more darkish than these areas, but they're not completely black. But there are also black areas. And that will result in a quite nice effect on the bump map. So we have three kind of layers of bump. So let's go with something like 0.1, pipe that inside bump input, and blend weight 0.5, and additive mode. So let's see what we got. You see, and we immediately start to get way more details in. And it doesn't look so even, but it looks very natural because we have three kind of layers of it. If I, oh, come on. I show you if I would just pipe in this one, what it looks like. But I like to use this technique because we, yeah, get a more organic pattern. Where's the bump map? Ah, no, it's loading quite slow. Okay, let's see. Let's get a screenshot. Then I pipe in this one. You see, it looks very even. And here we have this kind of bigger folds. I don't know why, but I kind of feel this is more organic and looks more rock-like. But yeah, it's totally up to you and a personal preference how you wanna go with it. And then I kind of used this technique 3 times with different noises. So I used Proxo here and another noise, basically the same scale but another noise type. Then also the same or a different scale here, so I can show you what this mask looks like. Looks a bit like that. And a last one that is a bit crazy with Sema, but you will not recognize these lines once they're stacked over the other bumps. So, however, let's pipe these in as well and activate them. Let's see what we got. I mean, the effect is not so strong, but yeah, this is my tweaks for the rocks, but there's one last thing we forgot, and that is the displacement. And basically here I want to change to 0, minus 0.5 and 0.5, and the scale should be 0.1. So let's get a screenshot just to compare. And inside here under OBJ we need to enable the displacement. But I think though for the final one I didn't go with displacement. You can try and play with it, but I felt like because it's the high poly source, the displacement is anyway baked in the geo, so we actually don't need it. And it's not doing quite a big difference, but it's eating quite a lot of render time, so I kept that off. But if you want to go with it, probably go with quite a low value like 0.01 or something like that. I can show you basically what it looks like, but probably will not see a big difference. And I feel like it's not worth it because you see how long it takes to initialize this displacement. There you go, forcing render time, tessellation, displacement. Quite a few seconds. you see. Let's see the difference. Yeah, barely noticeable. But you don't want to push it too far because otherwise, yeah, it will also not look good on the edges and stuff like that. It will get bent over the edges. So yeah, I think it's not worth it. I toggle this off for this render since we're going with the high poly source. And this will be the our final composition for and the final look development. And in the next part, we're gonna play with some fluid simulation and some animation for it, some handheld camera motion. And yeah, I hope you learned something in that part, and I hope to see you in part 3. Cheers.